So let's say you're dead set on buying the new M1 iPad Pro because of its killer M1 performance, the newly added Thunderbolt port, the crazy mini LED display, or for basically any other reason, but you have one major problem. You have no idea which model or which upgrades you should be buying. Well, that's exactly what I'm gonna help you figure out in this video, because you can actually make a couple of very important mistakes if you're not aware of all of them. In fact, there are 7 mistakes that you need to avoid when buying your new M1 iPad Pro. So before I get into the buyer's guide portion of this video, let's get into the first mistake you need to avoid, and that's buying the 11-inch iPad Pro model thinking that you're getting the new XDR display. That crazy display with over 10,000 mini LEDs, over 2,500 local dimming zones, and up to 1,600 nits of peak brightness is only available on the 12.9-inch iPad Pro model, so don't make that mistake. Yes, it's definitely more expensive, starting at $1,100, but this display is mind-blowingly good, packing even better HDR capabilities than Apple's $6,000 Pro Display XDR, since that display only has around 500 to 600 local dimming zones, which can lead to some ghosting issues. But the iPad Pro won't have that issue, so if you're someone who loves to watch movies or videos on your iPad, especially at night, the new mini LED display is going to be killer, since the black bars you get while watching movies will be pitch black and not gray like they've always been in the past. Now, moving on to mistake number 2, don't think that you absolutely need the mini LED display, because if you're not viewing HDR content, it's gonna be limited to the same exact 600 nits as the 11-inch iPad Pro's LCD display, which, by the way, is still a really nice display. On top of that, the 12.9-inch iPad Pro is much larger than the smaller model. On paper, the difference between 11 and 12.9 inches doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but the larger iPad actually has a 3:2 aspect ratio, which makes it very tall. So for someone who really prioritizes portability, it actually might just make sense to save $300 and get the 11-inch iPad Pro if you don't really care about HDR content. Now, as for mistake number 3, I know a lot of people are getting really hyped about the fact that the iPad Pro can now get up to 16 gigs of RAM, but you might actually be making a huge mistake by going for it. First of all, you gotta deck out your iPad Pro with at least 1 terabyte of storage to get 16 gigs of RAM, which means you're spending at least $1,500 for the 11-inch or $1,800 for the 12.9-inch model. That is a lot of money to pay if you're trying to get the extra RAM, especially since almost every app that's available on the App Store right now is optimized to run at a peak of 6 gigs of RAM, which is what the previous iPad Pro model had, and it ran basically every app just fine. So 8 gigabytes on the new iPad Pro is already a nice step up, but 16 gigs is absolutely overkill for almost every app available right now. So the reality is that most people do not need 16 gigabytes of RAM unless they're planning to run high-performance apps in the future, like potentially Final Cut Pro, Logic Pro, and Xcode, which are rumored to be announced at Apple's WWDC event. But if you were already planning on getting 1 terabyte of storage anyway, then the extra RAM is definitely an awesome addition, and I'd say that it's gonna help this iPad Pro hold its value well into the future when we start getting more high-end apps for the iPad. And that actually leads us to mistake number 4. Be very mindful about the amount of storage you buy, because the base model comes with 128 gigs of storage, and I would argue that it's not enough if you're planning to be downloading a bunch of games, apps, or doing professional productivity work. So definitely get at least 256 gigs of storage, unless you're mainly just gonna be browsing the web or watching YouTube videos. And if you're planning on having this iPad Pro completely replace your laptop, I would get at least 512 gigs, especially if you're doing professional work on it. Now for mistake number 5, remember that the iPad Pro now has a Thunderbolt port, so if you're gonna be investing into some nice accessories, don't make the mistake of buying the slower ones that don't take advantage of Thunderbolt. For example, this Sabrent Rocket portable SSD that we recently reviewed supports Thunderbolt 3, so you can now get crazy fast 2.7 gigabytes per second transfer speeds on the iPad Pro, whereas many of the USB-C drives are limited to around 500 to 1000 megabytes per second. On top of that, the new Thunderbolt port means you can use Thunderbolt docks, like this one from OWC, which turns one port into 3 full-speed Thunderbolt ports, which can be used for drives, displays, and whatever else. And they even have a higher-end model with a bunch of other ports, which are very convenient. But keep in mind that these ones require DC power since they're so powerful. But if you're just trying to get a simple USB-C hub for the iPad Pro, you can also go with something like this, which is our recommended hub since it's a reputable brand and it has a variety of ports and is currently on sale for $76 if you click the coupon icon. So if you guys are interested in any of those accessories, we're gonna leave some links down in the description below. Now getting into mistake number 6, don't buy the 5G model unless you know that you absolutely need it. The main reason for that is that this year, it's now a $200 upgrade compared to $150 for the previous model. So you're definitely paying a lot of extra money just for that 5G option. And in reality, there are now more locations with free Wi-Fi than ever before. And since the iPad Pro supports Wi-Fi 6, you're good to go for the future with fast speeds. And since every new iPhone now comes with 5G support, you can just use tethering off of your iPhone if you're ever in a situation where you don't have free Wi-Fi. But then again, having super fast 5G directly on your iPad Pro might be worth it if you rely on fast download or upload speeds, but just keep in mind that higher $200 price for 5G. And for mistake number 7, if you're thinking of upgrading to the new 12.9-inch iPad Pro and you already have a 12.9-inch Magic Keyboard case, there's a chance that your keyboard won't be compatible with this new iPad Pro because it's actually a bit thicker, so the case might not work properly with it. Now this hasn't been confirmed just yet, but it's definitely something to keep in mind because if you need to buy a new $350 Magic Keyboard case, that changes the upgrade options that you can afford on the iPad Pro itself. So now, with all of those mistakes out of the way, let's get into the buyer's guide. First off, if you're someone who's simply looking for a reliable and fast tablet with a really nice display to watch shows and YouTube videos, play games, and occasionally do some productivity work, then I'd say that the 11-inch iPad Pro is a great choice, starting at just $800. But I would definitely recommend getting at least 256 gigs of storage, and I don't think that you should get 16 gigs of RAM. And if you're thinking of getting it mainly for the touchscreen or Apple Pencil use, like for note-taking or drawing, then I'd argue that you don't really need the crazy mini LED display on the 12.9-inch model, and you especially don't need 16 gigs of RAM. Now, if you're thinking of taking it to the next level and getting the Magic Keyboard case to turn it into a dedicated laptop replacement, the 11-inch is still a great choice because you're going to be saving a lot of money compared to the 12.9-inch, and it's going to be way more portable as well. You'll probably also want at least 512 gigs of storage if you're taking file management and productivity work seriously. This is going to be great for students because you'll be able to use it like a laptop with that Magic Keyboard case that actually has a charging port built into the hinge, freeing up the main Thunderbolt port for transferring your files and whatever else. Now, if you're going to be going all out and using the iPad Pro for professional level video editing, programming, music production, or photo editing with those Pro Mac apps that we're expecting to come at WWDC, then I'd shoot for that 1 terabyte of storage model that comes with 16 gigs of RAM, which will really free up the system and make it as future-proof as possible. And as far as the 12.9-inch iPad Pro with the mini LED display, this is going to be the one to buy for those who really care about the display quality more than anything else, especially for people who like to watch movies with their iPad. And I can definitely see a lot of professionals buying this 12.9-inch model just for that insane HDR quality with 1600 nits of peak brightness. So it's going to be perfect for HDR video editing, even better than the $6,000 Pro Display XDR, which is super impressive. So there you guys go. Hopefully this video helps you make a decision, and if it did, go ahead and click the circle above to subscribe, and definitely feel free to use the links down below to those accessories and the iPad Pro. But if you're still confused on which one to buy, comment your specific use case down in the comment section below, and we'll help you make a decision. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.